All right.
How you doing?
All right. How are you?
Good.
I am fantastic.
I'm great.
well.
I'm really excited about this one.
You are?
Yeah.
I can see
I don't know
it.
why, but I am.
There's a glimmer in your eye, a twinkle. I don't know. Is that what that twinkle means?
I think so.
It doesn't mean that you're tired?
No.
No.
All
right.
I just had
You had
coffee with
You had your red eye.
4 espresso shots.
4?
Yep.
That's not a coffee.
Are you ready?
Okay. Everyone, welcome to The Harvest, episode 24. 24, The Harvest, where we discuss everything cinema and story. And as we learn, you learn. As we grow, you grow. My name is Xavier Garcia.
And I'm Jonathan Garcia.
Welcome, everyone, to this week's episode. Today, we're going to be discussing a topic that is very near and dear to us.
Yes.
Faith-based films. There's a lot of good and not so good examples of work within this space known as faith-based, as there are in any other film space, right? Now, this is a topic that we find both interesting and perhaps even necessary to discuss because it's a movement within the larger film industry that is gaining traction, and soon, if it's not already happening, it's going to be regulated more heavily by the gatekeepers of the industry so that it fits a definable and profitable category or box.
Yeah.
Now, right now, it's considered irrelevant, or at least it has been for quite some time, maybe up until now, as was mumble-core back in the early 2000s. But out of that irrelevant movement of mumble-core were birthed director powerhouses such as Oscar-nominated Greta Gerwig, who directed Lady Bird and Little Women, and the DUPLASS brothers themselves, that directed Cyrus and Jeff Who Lives at Home, amongst others. So we will be discussing not only the characteristics that make a faith-based film, but why this genre, if it even is important. Why it's relevant, and why you should care. You ready to get started?
Let's do it.
Let's do this. So, many of you listeners may already know, even from context or just from listening from the podcast, that we're both men of faith, and we're Christians who make parabolic films, and we define it that way for a purpose.
Yes.
We make parabolic films, and we don't necessarily say we're making faith-based films, we make parabolic films. Now, having said that, we've grown up watching a lot of what's called faith-based films. Mm-hmm. A lot of it, if not all of it, a large chunk of it. Whether it's biblical films with biblical themes, or what the industry is trying to define as faith-based. I mean, all of that we've watched it, we've seen it, we've grown up with it. It's been a part of our culture. It's been a part of our faith walk. It's been a part of family and the growing up of family and friends and whatnot. And so we have at times watched it with rejoicing and excitement. And at times with cringing, and running away, and a lot of times crying, and crying for good reasons, heartfelt, and crying for not so good reasons.
Yeah, you end up realizing that when you watch these films, you have to ask yourself, was their initial intent accomplished? And I know that one of the biggest things that I sometimes take out of these faith-based films is that it hits home when it comes to my relationship with God. And so you end up...
For the good or for the bad, right?
For the good or for the bad, exactly. But at the same time, that's why you say, you end up crying, you end up hitting, because it ends up affecting you personally. And so sometimes you'll end up having that experience within the film, but sometimes you're taken out of the film.
Yeah, so there's something interesting that hopefully we'll have time to talk about that perhaps is kind of a major component of the film faith-based genre, if you will, and that is the spiritual component. Mm-hmm. Now, faith-based denotes the fact that it's dealing with faith. It's dealing with a concept that is not so easily definable, right? I mean, faith in God, faith in the works of God, faith, and from a Christian perspective, the works of Christ Jesus. And what that elicits as a result of having faith, there is a spiritual connection that you have with God. And that spiritual connection creates and leads for one individual to have emotional manifestations, whether it's joy or conviction, but a series of emotions that when you watch a film that incorporates that element, that power, that spiritual authority, you gain something from it. You know, you're moved. Now, sometimes people will have spiritual experiences with films that are not, you know, faith-based, you know, where they will say they were moved by something and they were changed and transformed. I know I have had spiritual experiences by films that were not faith-based, but, you know, it was used, and the message perhaps by the author or the filmmaker may not have been this, but in the showing of what I was seeing, it connected with me in a certain way based off of my culture, my understanding, my faith, I mean, my makeup and who I am, that it touched me uniquely and it did something for me spiritually. So something that hopefully we will have time to talk about is the spiritual component of filmmaking and why that is important if you're going to define faith-based. But there's also just the pure storytelling. The pure storytelling aspect of it where, you know, you have genres and genre conventions. So let's define genre for a second, because I think that's important. We can't talk about genre without us having a definition for everybody to be able to, you know, fall back on as a base.
Sure.
Genre is a category of artistic composition, and as in music or literature or film, characterized by similarities in form, style, or subject matter. Can you think of some genres, some of the most popular pure genres?
Yeah, action, comedy, drama, sports.
Yep.
The biblical epics.
Yep.
That we love. Gosh, there's so many.
Yeah,
There's
westerns,
a major list. Horror.
biopics, horror, absolutely. Now those are considered pure genres, you know, and rarely are films today pure one genre. You know, sometimes and most times they're a hybrid of two. So, like, for example, you'll get films like an action comedy. Can you give me an action comedy? First one, the top of your head.
Action comedy, Lethal Weapon, Rush Hour.
Rush Hour. I like Rush Hour. That's a good one. That's a funny. Jackie Chan and...
I mean, I love both of those movies, and they have that humor. But Rush Hour, I feel like, has a... you know it's comedy.
Yeah.
Well, Lethal Weapon was funny.
They were both funny. You know, they play on some tropes which are essential to defining genre, like the trope of the cop that's tired.
Beverly Hills.
Yeah, the cop that's tired, that's ready to retire. And Bad Boys, for example, uses that for their comedic element.
Yeah.
The trope of the tired cop that wants to retire.
Yeah.
Lieutenant Murtaugh, you know, from Lethal Weapon, always like, I'm too old for this. You know, he would swear, I'm too old for this. But the same exact thing with the Martin Lawrence character in Bad Boys. He's like, we gotta retire. We're too old for this. It's a trope that defines the comedy genre in cop movies. Right?
Yep.
Okay, cool. Let's come up with another subject. Sports biopic. Another hybrid. Can you think of sport biopic films?
One of my favorites, Ali. I really enjoyed Ali.
Yep. Will Smith as Muhammad Ali. Yeah. He did a phenomenal job in that.
Miracle was another one.
I forgot about that one.
Miracle's a really good one.
That's a really good one.
That's a classic.
That's like combining three right there, right? If we're gonna talk about faith-based.
Right. Exactly.
That's good.
That's
okay.
Exactly.
42, the story of Jackie Robinson. Yep. Okay, and the last one. This one's a hard one. I want to combine two. I want to combine biblical and comedy. You don't see that very often. Biblical comedy. Can you think of biblical comedy films? And oftentimes people think...
It's hard because there's not that many.
Yeah, and the ones that are there, as far as I can think of right now, are not made by Christian filmmakers.
Right, exactly.
It's usually made by secular artists making fun of Christian films.
Yeah. And you know what? They're funny.
They're hilarious.
They're funny.
I'm sorry, but they're hilarious.
You know, there's a comedian who does that a lot, and he's actually Christian, but he's found that after he, you know, had his, situation. John Crist.
John Crist.
You know, that was his technique. That was his style, is making fun of, well, not just bringing humor to the Christian world.
Yep.
So I think it's there.
It's there. I mean, you've got. If we want to go back to Mel Brooks, the classic comedian, you know, Monty Python films and whatnot.
Right.
You have the what's it called, the history of the world.
Right.
You know, and you've got the famous scene of Moses coming out of Mount Sinai with 15 commandments.
Yeah.
I've got 15 commandments, and then one drops, cracks. 10 Commandments. I mean, it's classic.
This is great. It's hysterical.
It is.
Yeah.
And then you've got some other ones that are actually trying to almost be offensive towards the Christian faith, but that are, you know what? You can find the comedy in them. If you're not going to be overly sensitive when you're watching, you can find why secular audiences find certain elements of the Christian faith comedic.
Yeah. You have your boundary.
Right.
When it crosses blasphemy, the Holy Spirit will convict you.
Yeah, and you could be offended by some of the things that you watch.
You can either be offended or just understand, hey, this person doesn't understand my God.
Right.
And walk away.
And you can walk away, or you can make the choice of saying, I'm not going to watch this as a film that is going to inform me in any way about my relationship with my creator.
Yeah.
No, this is just like a comedy about something silly that I'm going to watch just for the sake of, for the same reasons that I would watch The Office.
Right.
Right. And you've got, like, for example, Year One with Michael Cera and Jack Black, who I think Jack Black is a professed atheist, actually.
Right.
So, and you know what? And if you can step back and watch some of the comedic elements from that, you can see how they play on certain tropes, and the tropes, because they carry meaning, become funny, because the tropes are based off of other examples and other films that have done over the course of film history, and that are, and that have been done well, and they rely on those things and they use them. And oftentimes you might not even be laughing at the joke that they're telling, you're laughing at the trope. Right. And you're laughing at a history of jokes that they are borrowing from, and that happens a lot in order to define even genre. Cool. So the big question, faith-based. Is faith-based a genre, or is it just like a desire?
There's a lot of good debate.
Yes.
On this particular topic.
There is.
Each point can be well explained.
Mm-hmm.
My personal feeling is that it is a genre.
Okay.
It deals with a lot of consistent elements that are shown throughout.
There are tropes,
put a collection,
there are elements.
There are tropes, there are elements that you see if you put a collection of, especially, Alex Kendrick films, and you put in Irwin. David A.R. White, or even the early Irwin content. You start putting them together and you do a film study, and you can write down the tropes that are consistent throughout them and find that this is something that is its own world.
Okay.
That's in demand.
Okay.
That people desire.
That's for sure. And that's a major element of it. Is there an audience?
Right. That people desire.
Yep.
But as a particular form of development. So they want it done this way. I desire this style of filmmaking, or this story structure, this way of being driven through the story, to be able to accept, that film.
I'm following you.
I think there's so much to this.
Can I throw some wrenches
Go
at
ahead,
you?
Throw it at me.
Because, look, I agree and I disagree. I agree.
Sure.
I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, you're convincing me. I get it. But then all of a sudden, you go onto IMDb.
Yeah.
And you look up, Facing the Giants. And under the genre, it'll say sports drama. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So now, that argument can go in two different directions. Number one, it's because Hollywood in and of itself is not yet considered faith-based as a genre, and so they don't have it as a subcategory to put into their, IMDb databases or the Rotten Tomato databases and whatnot, or critics and whatnot. So, there's a push from within the the faith-based film community to make faith-based a genre, but there are gatekeepers that haven't necessarily written it off as one and said, okay, fine, we'll give you that genre.
I think that's a huge point. I think Hollywood is now accepting this as a genre.
Yes.
Because...
And it's happening right before our very eyes right now as we speak.
The earlier... they've been Christian movies since, since
the 60s.
Hollywood has existed.
50s. You've got the Great Commandments. You've got, all these great epics.
But there was a...
40s.
There was a...
In fact, it's how it
development.
began.
There was a development of a particular style. So, for instance, if you think about what's his name? Jenkins, the movie, the Rapture movie. I'm blanking out right now off the top of my head.
Oh, Jenkins, the author, the dad?
Dad,
not
yeah.
Dallas Jenkins,
Not Dallas,
the
no.
Chosen, but yes. So he wrote the Left Behind
The Left
series.
Behind series
Yes,
that
yes.
was turned into movies.
Those got turned into films.
Those
yes.
were really a major shift, I think, in this new style of filmmaking where everything was very biblical movies.
Yeah, so there was only so much watching trains that people could do in the 20s, like just a train moving. Then all of a sudden, my heads were turned towards what's the greatest story? Well, the Bible. And so all of a sudden, there was a major push to taking biblical stories and turning them into epics and turning them into films, which is where you get the golden age, the golden era of cinema, and
Right.
you get the Ten Commandments, and you get, Ben-Hur, and you get all these great films. And then time went on, and some of these sword and sandals fell out of favor, and some of these biblical things
Right.
kind of fell out of favor for a while. And then all of a sudden, you've got the adaptation of Christian authors, such as Jerry Jenkins's Left Behind series, and now those get turned into films back in the 80s.
Right.
And boom, you've got a revival of this genre. I don't know.
Yeah,
this
it's
world.
like it's not has nothing to do with the biblical characters. It has a biblical message of rapture. This is what's gonna
Theological
happen
message, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And you follow the story of these certain individuals that aren't in the Bible. They're experiencing something that isn't within the Bible.
Right.
And as that develops, you start to notice that there is this. You can create stories outside of the Bible that can preach the gospel.
Right. Which is everything that, for example, Dallas, the son, is all about. Because he talks about it. He goes, he loves to read in between the lines of these major biblical moments and add the dialogue and humanity to these characters that we read about but never think about as actual human beings that existed. We think, when you read about Peter, James, and John, you think of them as like these saints that, exist in this, spiritual realm, this ethereal universe. But no, they were human beings that have historical writings written about their exploits. And what Dallas does is he tries to then add humanity to them and portray them as human beings that are experiencing biblical events. So it's like you've got the dad that kind of began this thing, and now you've got the son, working in television and streaming television to do essentially the same exact thing, which is what we're seeing as being an accepted transition or change or
Right.
a trend that is changing kind of like genres for the faith-based world.
Yeah, and Facing the Giant was such a impact
Yes, it was.
when it was first of all done with a few bucks
Yeah, it was a few thousand, I think 10,000.
by the church.
Or some little, or like no. Flywheel was 10,000, and I think Facing the Giants they did for like $500,000 or something
Like that.
little,
Yeah.
or a
And
couple
so,
$100,000.
their marketing tactic was it was good. They brought it to churches. They communicated to churches.
Yeah, I mean, look, they're very well connected with the Baptist church and the Baptist denomination, and so when they take it to the annual convention, they had a lot of pastors and a lot of churches kind of supporting what it was that they were doing, and so they used the resources around them as a word of mouth,
Right.
Advertising tool.
And so it kind of broke the mold once people started having equipment that was accessible, affordable. They realized that filmmaking could be a really good tool for evangelism.
Right. So here's where the film art starts to break down a little
Exactly.
bit, and it becomes
Hollywood and the equipment and the expenses of production were just it was too expensive.
Yeah.
But when technology was available,
Yeah.
people began to explore the technology that was affordable.
Yeah.
And create content that
resonated with them personally.
it exactly. And so one of the things I remember growing up and just before I accepted the Lord in my life when I was like 17, my mom was kind of secretly putting in like Christian rap,
Here,
And
listen to this. You might like this.
You might like this. I was like,
Put down the Kanye. Listen to the Lecrae.
yeah, I was like, all right, sure. And I listened to it, and I remember my cousin was all about rap. Like, he knew his rap, his history. Like, he could sing every song.
Yeah,
and I was kind of like, hey, listen to this. This was sent to me. He was like, this is fire. Who is this? And I was like, oh, my mom gave this to us, and
okayed it for you. It's if he knows everything there is to know about rap,
it
and he likes
okayed
this,
it, right? It okayed it. But then I began to listen to the lyrics,
right.
And it touched me, it affected me. All that to say is that it takes Christians a long time to use tools that are effective for ministering the gospel. And I think that when facing the giants, that film was very successful in its ability to touch the hearts of whether believers or unbelievers. They realized, boom, there's a market here.
Yeah.
There's a market here. Let's explore it.
Yeah.
And then a lot of people really...
Yeah. I mean, there's always been and we're getting into deep theological conversations, but there's always been a fear even through the Christian faith about technology. Technology has always been an antagonism towards the Christian faith because there's so many erroneously explored theological debates around like the mark of the beast. Oh, is television the mark of the beast? Or or when radio came out, radio is the mark of the beast. Like everything.
Barcodes came out.
Like what's that?
When barcodes and food came out,
it's like so now the food is the mark of the beast, or the internet is the mark of the beast. And so now, although there are certain elements of beastly realities within these technological advances. I mean, look, the internet came out, and now all of a sudden we have this this terrible pornography epidemic in our world, right? And so yes, there are beastly components to these advances in technology, but because Christianity has always been so adverse to falling victim to these warnings from God in Revelations or in other biblical accounts, there's always been kind of like a pumping the brakes on using technology in order to preach the gospel. The exact opposite of what Paul did. Paul found the technology that Rome had created for the world in roads, and he used this new technology of roads and paved roads to preach the gospel. And roads were also the place where people were robbed and murdered. And so with every advance of technology, there's always going to be some sort of usage for evil.
Right.
It's just it comes with it. Wherever evil can fit, it'll find its place. So, having said that, though, to your point, that because every time there's a technological advance, the Christian faith has been slow to its development and using and embracing
so.
it. Right.
Rightly so, for the protection of the soul,
a protection of the youth, because a parent will never know. It's like, oh no, back in my day when I was a kid, things were pure, and things are, meanwhile, they weren't, because for your grandparent, it was like a crooked and perverse generation, and it will be moving forward for every parent looking at their child, trying to protect their child. And so, yes, there is that element. And so now everybody's got a cell phone in their pocket.
Right.
And everybody can make a movie. And everybody and anybody shouldn't be making a movie, but everybody and anybody can make a movie. And now this is where the Christian, whom is extremely passionate about proselytizing, uses the technology to make a movie, to doing something that they've been commanded and decreed by the Great Commission, right? And so it turns into a conflict of interest, does it not?
Yeah. When going back to art and what you're saying now, because filmmaking is such an art, and you combine it with preaching, if the art or the talent is not there, you can actually hurt the cause.
Yeah.
So that's been the biggest debate about this faith-based movement.
Yeah.
How far can you go till you actually start hurting the message?
Yeah.
And you begin to question, is this faith-based, whether genre or style of filmmaking, the desired type of film, is it going to help or is it going to hurt?
Right. And how can you determine that?
And who's it for?
How can you determine that? Because an individual may have a really, good intention.
Sure.
And maybe they don't have the talent. Maybe they don't have the training. Maybe they're not the greatest writer, which is 99.9 times, out of 100 the issue with the faith-based film, the writing. But I digress. Maybe they're not the best DP.
It is so hard, I think, for a Christian, because Christians don't like to offend.
Right.
And Christians are easily offended.
Yeah, both. Yeah, literally. They don't like to offend and they're easily offended. Yeah.
It's such a tough, in the real world, for instance, like you think of like shows like, what's those reality TV shows, American Idol, where they're just destroying people.
Yeah.
And
Dreadful,
it's a completely
horrible
wake-up call
to
that individual.
To where you came from, yeah.
I think that in the scriptures, Jesus said it best, truth and love. I think that is so necessary when it comes to using an art form, to knowing how you're supposed to approach these things. But at the end of the day, I wouldn't stop an individual who has no talent.
No.
Because
if
the burning is within them. That was probably put in there by God, probably to minister to a friend. Doesn't have to go to the Blockbuster theater.
So you brought up a great point, audience, but I'll let you keep going. Because I want to bring up this next
topic.
And
in the seed is his work, his sowing, and God is going to be watering it himself. So wherever it goes, it goes. Right. Now, you have to be okay with the critique. You have to be okay with...
Well, it depends on the goal. If the goal is to become an excellent filmmaker, then you got to be open for the critique. You got to be hungry for it, right? And look, an excellent artist is always going to be their worst critic. And they're okay to receiving, as hard as it is, they have to learn to be okay with receiving constructive criticism. But you brought up a really great point, and that is the audience.
Right.
And as a young filmmaker, as a novice, as a beginner, your audience begins at the level of your talent.
Yeah.
So you can tell a story and your mom's always going to love it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So you will always have an audience of one. So for you filmmakers out there, know that there will always be an audience for your content, unless your mom hates you.
Right.
But honestly, a mom will always will hear you, right? And the better that you become at your craft and at your talent, the wider your audience becomes. And so that means that it doesn't necessarily mean that as a filmmaker, you're supposed to preach to the masses and make a film for the millions, because even the Russo brothers, until they were introduced to Marvel, were not making films for the millions. It was the Marvel story that opened them up to the millions and the billions of people, right? And so it's about the story, it's about the craft, it's about the team. So let's backtrack a bit, because there are times now, talking from a spiritual perspective, right, where God will call you to preach to an audience of one, and he will have you use a film to do it. That's why I'm careful about trashing faith-based films, because I have no idea what the inspiration, what the motivation, what that initial push, whether it was natural, spiritual, or carnal, whatever it was, I don't know what that was. Now, I can critique the art. I could critique the craftsmanship. I can critique the, how a shot was pulled off and how talent was directed. But, why this person took that on and did this, I don't know. We have to be careful with that, right? Because there can be an audience of one.
Absolutely.
Even if the one is just God.
Right. And I would even add that my desire for that individual is to be able to successfully accomplish his task, right? And as well as create the world of Christian filmmaking, not even just faith-based, just Christian filmmaking, the individual, whether the individual is a Christian or whether the film has a Christian message, that there's success within that.
Yeah.
So if I'm going to approach an individual my honesty will come out of the fact that my hope is that you or the story becomes successful and you continue to become good at it, because it's only going to make the message of the gospel better.
Yeah.
So when I heard that rap song, and if it was mumbles, for me, that would have been like, what is this? You know what I mean?
Or the production value was low, and
exactly,
or he wasn't rhyming. And
it wasn't rhyming exactly, and it was like some grandpa just throwing exactly trying to.
This is cool, and I'm gonna be
which
wild
is out there.
Him,
which is out there. It's not about making Christianity cool.
No, right.
Right. It's about making Christianity real,
relevant,
and necessary.
Yeah.
And that, for me, is the key. I don't care if when I heard it and I was like, all right, that sounds nice. But it wasn't until I listened to it that it was like, this stuff is real.
Yeah.
What he's saying is real.
Right.
And that's when it was like, I need to reevaluate my life.
But it was the production value that drew you even to listen.
Exactly. That was the tool to lure me in.
Yeah.
Right.
So going back to the conversation of audiences, and let's bring up a couple of, faith-based auteurs or faith-based filmmakers that are famous within the faith-based community.
Sure.
Right? And just kind of the audience and talking about the audience. Because we already brought up the Kendrick brothers. As far as men of integrity, you cannot find a better person. Mm-hmm. Those are two men that they do what they preach, and I've met them in person. Phenomenal human beings. They're known for their films that, self-admittedly, preach to the choir, right? And so they've defined their audience. Mm-hmm. So there may be you may talk to someone outside of the faith-based world about the Kendrick brothers, and they may have no idea who they are, like the Kendra what, the Kendra who. Right. But if you were to ask somebody that goes to the International Christian Film Festival, if you've seen War Room, they're like, I live and die by that movie. It saved my marriage. It saved my life. I know that. I've been wanting to to meet them, and so there's an audience.
Yeah.
There. And therefore, because there's an audience, there's a demand. And because there's a demand, they are very successful.
But the question is...
What's the question?
At least to them, is the audience for the unbeliever or the believer?
What do you mean?
So what I mean is this. I go to these festivals, and I see the fans. Mm-hmm. And the fans are either people who have fallen away and have reignited their faith, or people who are in the faith.
Yeah, so it's like you're not necessarily going to get, a secular audience coming to these festivals cheering on,
so
facing the Giants.
If their faith-based films if they're making their content, are they making it for... Now, this is tough because I don't know the hand of God. I don't know all of his works in the sense of who's he saving that has never heard the gospel. You know what I mean? There's a lot of people who grew up in a home where the parents were Christian and they just, they backslid. But the question is, I'm asking, what's the audience? What is the percentage of the audience when these movies are made? Are they made for the churches? Or are they made for the world?
I think you have to ask the filmmaker.
Right. Absolutely.
Because the filmmaker, if you were to ask the Kendrick brothers, they, like I said, they self-admit that these are specifically for the body, for the church, for the body of Christ.
Right.
And it is for empowering.
But what I'm saying is not all faith-based films have that audience in mind.
Right. Because if you were to ask David A.R. White,
right,
of Pure Flix, his audience, I think he wants to go worldwide.
Or Irwin Brothers. They want to go worldwide.
Right. Oh, well, hey, and that's a great point even to talk about where Hollywood is at with faith-based films, because the Irwins just signed a great deal with Lionsgate to launch Kingdom Studios, which is now kind of the merging of two worlds, the merging of Hollywood with faith-based films. I think even Rich Peluso up at Sony has been doing a lot of work of trying to like incorporate more faith-based work. I mean, that's where you get, I think Soul Surfer was a Affirmed Films. I mean, there's a bunch. I can't think of them off the top of my head. But nevertheless, like there has been a confluence of these worlds of the Hollywood and the faith-based. And the Irwins, because their storytelling ability has now reached an audience appeal that is worldwide, because they are now dealing with faith elements that touch the human condition. And we're all human. And so some of the things that they talk about, like, for example, fatherlessness, father-son relationships with their, most recent, not I Still Believe, I Can Only Imagine. There are some themes in these films that touch a global audience, and then this audience is like, well, I'm not necessarily Christian, but I've got some daddy issues, and this film speaks to me, and and then they're thinking, Christianity worked for them, maybe it works for me, and that's the hope of the Christian filmmaker, that they will look at their conditions, they'll look at their life, and they'll realize that there's always a better way, there's always a way of light out of the darkness, and that is by way of Christ Jesus, right? And that's the hope, whether they're doing it with a slap across the face, where they're taking the Bible and hitting you across the face, or it's sewn into the themes and it's sewn into the story as a byproduct of the lives of the individuals, and not necessarily the upfront, in your face, message. Because the Irwins have found a way to sew these things and make it just kind of more real and more, pertaining to the human condition, it has grown the audience that they pull in. To the point where, Lionsgate notices and says, wow, these guys are racking in, like 83 million in their box office, 63 million, 100 million, like they're in that, and they're only putting in like the 10 million, 5 million. I mean, it's like an 8-time, an 800 return, or, you know what I'm saying? Or 8-time return. And so it's causing for now this need to define, okay, are we going to say that faith-based, as we began this conversation, is a genre or is it not? And if we define it as a genre, well, what does that mean? I think the defining of any genre is for the sake of parsing out and organizing and categorizing what is to be seen by the audience, right, because it's all for the mighty dollar, right? It's all for the mighty dollar, because at the end of the day, when a person knows, I'm going to watch faith-based, and if they can see that faith-based is a title, and and there's an audience that's big enough to be drawn to that genre, then they'll know, okay, this is that we can do our analytics, we can, figure out who's watching it, why they're watching it, how to get them to watch it, and so forth and so on. And I think that's going to be the biggest determination right now at this point where we're at, where the film industry is being extremely disrupted by COVID-19, for the faith-based tag to be added to films, because the people that are going to be continuing to go to theaters, I really do think, is going to be the Christian audience after quarantine and COVID-19. And so when you add faith-based as a genre, you're going to draw the Christian world to films, because they use films as events for proselytizing, can never say that word, preaching, evangelism, and they will bring family members to the movies, and they will bring them to the theaters the same way that they will bring families to the church to watch a play, or to watch a choir song, or to receive a guest speaker. They will bring people to the theaters, and if theaters are going to wake up to this and say, well, look, we need to create a subgenre, because otherwise theaters are going to close. They're going to do that. I think it's going to happen. I think we're at the cusp of that. Somebody's got to tell one of these execs, like, hey, you want to start bringing people into the theaters? Consider faith-based as a genre, and put that in the IMDb. Put that in, the poster. Put that in the Rotten Tomatoes, the film, the Metacritic. Now,
that's true.
There's something called tribalism, right? And it's the state or the fact of being organized in a tribe, in a sub-unit, in a unit. Kind of like the behavior and the attitudes that stem from strong loyalties to one's own tribe or social group. It's a society motivated by, culture. And so the concept of tribalism happens in any group. Now, in Christianity, this desire to self-categorize and to have this culture out from that tribal culture of what is Christianity has been born the desire to have faith-based as a film genre. You're smiling because you've got something.
No. I'm just. It's hard to not say genre.
Right. Yeah, it really is.
It's so hard to not say genre because the demand, the style, the tropes, it's all there. And so that's keep
it's
going.
all there. No, you're right. Absolutely right. I have been having a tough time to try and keep it like neutral and not go right into genre yet, because I guess the whole point of this podcast is to finally determine, is it or is it not? And I'm already saying it is as I'm going through it. So it's like I'm not giving the audience the opportunity to decide. Nevertheless, I want to ask the question, because there are major reasons why a genre would become a genre, and I think it's, there are categories, like talking about faith-based, for example. What would be a viable reason for us to consider something a specific genre? I think Hollywood would say the box office.
Right.
If it makes money, Hollywood's going to say, hey, let's call them whatever they want to be called. Because if it makes money, we can categorize it and bring people in.
Right.
We can call it Jesus films.
Right.
We can call it poo-poo caca films. I don't care what you want to call it. Call it whatever it is. And if it makes money, we'll call it that.
So for Christians.
Let's do it for Christians, and then we'll do it for the world. For a secular audience.
Our biggest passion is the authenticity of Scripture.
Okay.
If Scripture is manipulated,
yeah.
If Scripture is off, if it's not...
Then it's like, get out of here, you don't belong faith-based.
Yeah, if it's not in alignment with traditional understanding of the faith.
Yeah. And
then you've already...
Right.
You have... That already takes you out of the tribe.
Right, exactly. You get kicked out of the tribe. Which is interesting because within the tribe, there are so many sub-tribes, right? You've got, the Mormon church down in Utah, they've built this mega, beautiful recreation of first century Jerusalem. Beautiful. Mm-hmm. I believe The Chosen is filming their second season, right? Yeah. And they did that as their own personal pursuits to filming their biblical understanding from their theological purview and perspective. So are they going to bring in an audience that's as big as the Irwin brothers, even though that's in the faith-based genre? What faith?
I think a lot of Christians are aware of basically the fundamentals of Christianity.
Right, there's some fundamental tenets.
Yeah, and there are denominations that have certain revelations, personal convictions that would stop them from watching certain, even faith-based films.
Yeah.
Nonetheless, there is a consensus, whether written in our hearts, consciously, that brings in or accepts a particular movie because it checks those marks.
Yeah.
So when you think of, for instance, the Mormon Church or any other religion that deals with biblical, because think about it, even Muslims have Old Testament, scriptures and connections that they have their perspective of, the Exodus or
Abraham's story.
Exactly.
Because you've got the story of Ishmael that comes out of it.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
And, there could possibly be soon a growth of that market.
It's interesting, though, because you're talking about tribalism, right? And kicking someone out of the tribe. Like, it can get violent even within... Because a component of tribalism is that, like, if you become a threat to the tribe, then, like, you must be removed, and eradicated. It happened with the Essenes.
Give us an example of a movie that...
Well, hold on.
Tribalism.
Because this happened to the Essenes. In the Essene community, there were very strict rules
Yes. Yeah.
for you to, be a part of the Essene tribe. And it's actually interesting if you read the Dead Sea Scrolls and you look into some of the history of, of what they wrote about, like the categories and the levels of rank within the Essene community. Like if you messed up, you got ostracized. And because you were part of the Essene community, at one point, like you were already ostracized by the rest of the world. And so if you get kicked out of that world, you can't go back. So you're just a no man in no man's land. And so, like, let's say you're like all your eggs are in the faith-based basket, and the tribe kicks you out. Where do you go, right? It's like, so anyway,
that's another reason why I believe that the Irwin brothers were given a studio, and not that the studio created their own faith-based department within themselves.
Because they
know that there's authenticity. They've gained the trust of the community, the faith-based community,
the tribe,
and they said they've probably seen Hollywood's unsuccessful approach on their
that's
filmmaking.
Where your question.
And they're say, let's get these guys and let's create that department.
So
which I'll
answer your question. Go ahead.
I expect soon. They're starting to see the numbers. Sony has seen it for a long time, and they created Affirm Films, and now Lionsgate's like, we've been missing out on this.
Yeah, we're missing out on this genre,
exactly,
on this tribe,
and so you have, but the failures in these films. They realize this is a very touchy thing.
There's weird things that happen because there are films that are kicked out of the tribe but are still successful.
Yep.
And then there are films that are kicked out of the tribe and then they bomb, right? And I think there's a lot of factors for that. There's no way to define it because like big movie stars, big budget, big special effects. The spectacle will draw people in to watch a film, whether or not it fails the categories of the tribe. So like for example, I'll just give you an example. Ben-Hur, the 2016 remake of Ben-Hur. Yeah. Now I love the original Ben-Hur, and I actually enjoyed the spectacle of the new Ben-Hur, the 2016. The special effects, the chariot racing, it was breathtaking. I mean, nothing beats what the original was able to accomplish with the technology that they had at the time. I mean, I'm sure horses were hurt in the making of that film because it's too real, right? But anyway, I digress. The 2016 Ben-Hur flopped. It was missing also that spiritual component, I think, because it was also missing the faith-inspired director behind it, the auteur, and therefore, because it missed the mark on certain tenets, the tribe was like, I sniff a phony. Yeah. This misses the mark. It got kicked out and it failed.
Yeah, and you're not doing yourself a favor when you're finding a director that makes content that is the complete opposite of Christianity.
Some of his previous films were a little racy. Yeah,
so people do their research.
That's true.
They'll say, okay, this guy has no clue what Christianity is.
He has no rights.
Now, I don't know these things personally. I haven't personally dug through his life and done a bio of him, but I know that people do their research and they can discern, and right away, right off the bat, Christians just can discern whether this is really a faith-based film or a film that has Christian principles, and they'll quickly be shut off from it. They can even walk out of the theater. They will. They will.
But that, and that's a good thing. And that's good. That's good. Okay, look, if you're going to protect the tribe, it's kind of like I see it like I would protect my family, right? I'm not going to allow someone into the door that I feel like is going to potentially cause any harm to my family, whether it's physical, emotional, psychological, spiritual, whatever, right? And so the tribe needs to protect the tribe. Okay, sure. But there's also, the tribe never remains pure to its tenets and beliefs, and it always adapts, modes of conduct that are outside of the tribe's organizational code of conduct and structure, right? So, like, there's what's happening even within the tribe is that it's becoming very Hollywood in its dealings and negotiations and businesses, so that, like, even we ourselves experienced a circumstance where we made a film that we felt was very had I mean, it dealt with the birth of Jesus, talking about a blood throne, and it compared it with the father-son relationship between Herod, who was a murderous, evil king, Herod the Great, and his youngest son Antipas, whom is the famous Antipas. He was the king, I guess, at that point. I mean, he was just a tetrarch, but that presided over the Jesus's trial, or rather was presented by Pilate, was presented to him. Jesus was presented to him. So anyway, we juxtaposition the relationship between King Herod the Great and Antipas with the father-son relationship of Joseph and Yeshua, Jesus. And we come up with this dark film because it's from the perspective of Antipas, of this son that suffered a lot of violence and a lot of death in a house where he was just a kid growing up. And we're trying to explore, a character to try and figure out why was he the way that he was? Why was he standing before Jesus at Jesus' trial, before his crucifixion, and he was blind to seeing who he was, right? Why? And so we went after this film, and we did it in a dark way.
Yeah.
And we created this awesome poster, and the tribe was like, oh, this is a horror film. I'm not watching this. Let's kick this out of the tribe. Right? That happened.
Yeah, it did.
It happened. And so I'm just like...
But it's funny thing is, at first they quickly were like, whoa, what is this? And then it wasn't until certain individuals in the industry were involved in it, they're like, oh, so-and-so's in this? Okay, let me take a look at it. And that's another thing too. It's, you find an actor, you make a movie that has probably no biblical principle, but you throw in a Christian actor, and
you throw in Jim Caviezel.
Jim Caviezel, and they're like, wait a minute,
I gotta watch it because it's Jim Caviezel, and he was Jesus, and he was Jesus, Christ.
Exactly. So there's certain things that will cause people to quickly, and that's what a good producer will do.
Yeah.
They will be able to organize and make sure that they know what
strategy.
Yeah, exactly.
Strategy.
What alarms will show up when you're creating a content. But yes, they did. They shunned it, and it wasn't until. But that's another thing. Is again, our approach doesn't fall in the faith-based structure.
No, it doesn't. We don't necessarily look to the faith-based tropes in order to make the stories that we want to tell, because we're just telling the stories that we want to see in the theater.
Right. Exactly. For instance, we want to tell a story, but not everyone will have the same revelation.
Sure.
A lot of people will watch this and be like, this is what I got out of it.
Right.
And it'll have a core, clear message.
You'll get the journey of the hero. You'll understand kind of the core components.
I know that a lot of people at the end were disgusted by Herod, and a lot of people were actually crying with Herod.
Yeah, that
and
was
the
interesting.
son, and they were like
crying for him and broken for him.
I realized, wow, my heart is broken for this child who's in a house of just
destruction,
wickedness, and destruction.
Yeah,
and you don't walk out. I know that I haven't walk out of a Kendrick's brother, then I'm thinking, about the sinners. I'm thinking about the Christians. I'm thinking about I'm focused on the particular story of this person who is changing throughout the film and experiences salvation. Yeah. So ultimately, I think that there are films out there that dance the fine line. For instance, a lot of Mel Gibson's movies do this as well. They bring
Which is
in
interesting
stories.
Because Mel Gibson is such a.
I think when Passion came out, that checked him off as like, this guy's movies. He even if he goes back and do Hollywood stuff, he's got that in. He's in. He's in the tribe.
What is that? What do you think? So let's say Passion had not been as successful as it was. Do you think that the tribe would still accept Mel Gibson's films as faith-based films? I mean, all right, let's give an example of some of his quote-unquote faith-based ones. Let's see if you and I agree on the ones that are considered faith-based. All right, so Passion of the Christ, is that faith-based for you, yes or no?
Because I think faith-based is a genre, I would say no, and I would call it biblical.
Okay, yeah, it's biblical.
Biblical, almost epic.
Okay, a biblical epic. Okay, all right, fine, I'll give you that. All right. I mean, look, if we're talking about the tropes of like following the stories of those that are saved versus those that are not saved, the spiritual impact that it has on the audience. We're talking about the audience appeal and the tribe. I don't know. It could be some. Look, let's just put it this way: the tribe considers it one of its own.
Yeah.
I feel like this is
because here's the thing: it came at a time where it sparked
2003, 2004.
It came at a time where it sparked in Hollywood, a Hollywood film.
That's
sparked.
True. That's true.
Well,
it was an independent. I mean, it was self-funded.
Right. But it was right. Yeah, because all the studios were like, nope,
we're not doing this. Not with that guy. He's poison.
And that was huge for Christians.
Yeah.
Because in the faith,
we feel that way.
We felt like
we're poison.
Exactly.
So he did it.
Exactly. So he went all in, trusting in God, because in his own testimony, he knew even in his sinful ways, he's like, I have to do this for God.
Right.
I have to, regardless of my imperfections, this is beyond me. And he's telling Jim Caviezel, you may not ever work here again.
Yeah,
just want to let you
work
know,
in Hollywood ever again as a
we're
result of this
sacrificing everything for God.
Right.
And that's a big element to being like, all right, this guy's the real deal, because when you're willing to give up everything, money, reputation, all that stuff, you're in.
Okay.
So that for me, I think for me, that was my being like, he's in, but not only is he in, he made something bomb.
Well, yeah, huge. It was huge. What's
and
like
it wasn't, and it was
$630 million
and it was rated
in the
R.
box office. Rated R.
And it was rated R.
And for a long time.
But it was also real.
Yeah.
And so those are big elements for me that were like, all right, this isn't faith-based in my book. Not that faith-based films are not real. They're real. These are experiences of individuals.
But what is it? Was it the violence and the rated R? Is that what?
No, they weren't ashamed to go all in.
Right.
And I think faith-based has a wall that they're not willing to pass.
The crossover.
There's and
like, if you cross over, you get kicked out of the tribe.
You possibly get kicked out of the tribe, or they're very hesitant until they see, are these elements in there?
Yeah.
Or does this person have in there?
Or box office success. Unfortunately,
yeah.
that is also a part of it.
Yeah.
It really, truly is.
Yeah.
So is the Rotten Tomatoes score. Mm-hmm. That's a part of it too. And what about the spiritual impact that it has on an individual?
Right.
That's a part of it too.
I know as well as you. I went out of there weeping.
Oh yeah.
I got out of there weeping and being like, I wasn't serving the Lord. I'm sorry, Lord. You know what I mean? And that was me.
Yeah.
That was me. I crucified you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I was a sinner, and you took my shame. So
I came out weeping too.
Did exactly what God wanted it to do.
Yeah, and what the filmmaker wanted to get out of it.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
So that's for Christians. That's why it checked the marks, because it was a biblical story. It was just following biblical principles. Right. He did his research. He went through it everywhere to make sure that it followed the guidelines. That's a huge thing for faith-based filmmakers. They made sure that he.
So it sounds like you're arguing for faith-based.
Well,
yeah, I think you're.
Well, here's the thing. Again, it deals with the fact that, are you willing to break the barrier of what it takes to tell a realistic story?
A true story.
Because an atheist would look at a faith-based film and they say, that evil guy is a caricature.
Yeah.
That's not me.
Okay, so let's say you're going to do the story of the sword and the switchblade. Or what's it called? Is that what it is?
The sword and the switchblade. Yeah. The
story of Pastor Wilkerson.
Wilkerson.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's say you're gonna do that,
which was a great movie, by the way.
Okay. Let's say you were gonna go in and be real.
Yeah.
When keeping it real goes wrong.
right. And technically, he's supposed to be seeing prostitutes.
Exactly.
Drugs.
And getting to the point where, but how did he actually see the prostitute? Did he see the prostitute dressed in a turtleneck, but the language was prostitute-ish? Or did he see the prostitute in a way where, like, a Christian would be like, oh, I can't look at this?
It deals...
So, like, so that's
okay,
like...
So here's how I would answer it.
You gotta be careful, right? It's like when
totally
keeping it real goes wrong. It's a Chappelle
You need
skit
discernment for knowing how far you are willing to show. Because even in Hollywood movies, sometimes you don't see the axe chop in the head.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And those are and sometimes the things that are the reason why those decisions are being made is because they want to stay within the PG-13
Right, exactly.
because it's a greater audience appeal.
Exactly.
The potential, the algorithm is there that you'll make more money off of a PG-13 versus a rated R,
Right.
so you pull back on
Right,
those things.
right. And so for me, although the Passion was gruesome,
It wasn't glorifying.
There it is. It
The
wasn't
evil and the gruesome.
glorifying the evil.
Some
it was
people-
exposing.
Some people would say that it was just because of the way that he, the slow motion and then the claw going, and then
It was exposing
Yeah.
the evil.
okay. Hey, look,
And
I'll
so,
give it to you.
and for instance, in the Sword of Switchblade, which is a great example because here's David Wilkerson going into like the darkest of darkest corners
and
of these gang members
yep.
that are. He's in there preaching the gospel to them, and they're just like, who's this guy? While there's naked, women all around him probably, and
in the real life, but not in
the
the
real
movie.
life, not in the movie. Right. So the thing is, what do you show, and how far will it go until it's being glorified?
Yeah, and that's
Until it's like, yeah, that's what we want to put because it's cool,
and so
and we
here's
want to make
where-
it. You know what I mean?
where we stand, and
Yeah.
correct me if I'm wrong. The scripture that says, "Out of the abundance of the heart,
Right.
the mouth speaks," right?
Right.
And so, what it is that you're putting in, whatever it is that you're filling yourself up with, is what is going to come out in your art.
Mm-hmm.
It's what's going to come out in your rhetoric. It's what's going to come out in your films.
Yes.
And therefore, you can be real, but there will always be the check, like within where you're saying, all right, is this an instance where keeping it real goes wrong? And therefore, you can then, as a filmmaker, as a director or producer, or even as a DP, and those individuals within the department heads that have say power, can discern, okay, where is this art in this story serving the story or serving the individual?
Right.
Serving me, the self.
Right.
Like, oh, this is just for my own satisfaction of seeing this. Or is this serving the story? Right? And that's a major moment. That's a major demarcation right there. If you can draw a line there, then you can discern and see, okay, is this necessary? Is this needed? Or are we just doing this because we want to do something that's crossing the line?
I think that's huge. Yeah, I think for the faith-based films, you see a lot of times that a lot of people, why they're so successful is because of that. People are sharing it because it's doing that which it intended to do, bring that gospel message of salvation or of change, whether it's a true story or not. And I think that if it is a movie that is just this self-containing thing, desire, I'm watching it because I'm enjoying it, but it has no action, has no call to action. And what I mean by that is it doesn't cause me to want to send it to you and say, watch this movie, it's going to touch your heart, and it's going to draw you closer to God.
Right.
Whereas you see these movies, for instance, like a Exodus, Gods and Kings, and it's this biblical epic, and you're watching this. I have no desire to really share that with an individual unless it has a strong element that's going to say, Jesus is Lord, and everyone's chasing to go read the scriptures.
Unless you're watching it for the sake of the entertainment of it.
Sure, yeah. But that's my point, is that I think that in faith-based, I think that there is that moment where a lot of these films are being shared a lot of times because of the fact that, hey, this has this message that I want to share to you so that you can experience and change as well.
Right. Okay. So then, to wrap up.
Okay. We can keep going.
We could, but we can't.
Okay.
We're near the hour mark.
Sure.
To wrap up, parabolic films. Because we're self-described as creators of parabolic films. What do you mean by that? What do we mean by that?
Very simple. Jesus spoke in parables.
Yeah.
He told a true story of the heart of man.
Yeah.
And a lot of time these stories didn't end well.
No.
They told a moral principle of the individual to awaken to their conduct.
Yeah.
And also were just real.
Yeah.
Now, that's why I feel that, for instance, a Blood Throne really checked that mark. It really showed. It wasn't pretty. We went through the life of this person, and he never had any change.
Right. Well, Antipas
did.
Right.
Herod
right.
had no change.
Right.
And we followed him throughout the
film.
film.
We see him sort of with remorse,
but his
at the end.
His change was still even darker.
Yeah, it was rooted in... Yeah, so he changed, I guess, for the worse with the remorse. I mean, he does go through a transition.
Yeah.
He goes from this prideful, arrogant, strong, self-seeking king to this meek, broken, meager, still prideful, but somewhat remorseful king whom is still blaming others for his faults and his flaws. I don't know. I think that there's a bit of an element of where we hint at perhaps he was blaming himself,
right?
Which is where there's this somewhat subtle change in the character.
Yeah, and I think also too in Parabolics we don't cut away to now is the time where the individual sits down with the scriptures and ends up praying the prayer of salvation.
Yeah, well, that's a trope that is
common
in a lot
within
of times. Certain faith-based films.
Right. That isn't in Parabolics. It's more so the story. What is the story saying? What is the world of the story saying that is going to cause you to have a spiritual revelation?
Right. And it can or it may not. And those that have ears to
hear
hear
right there.
will hear, and those that don't will just receive a good story.
Right. And that's where we leave it up to God.
Yeah. And
we know that we wrote something that He desired for us to do. Because
it's not our job to do the convicting.
Right.
It's not our job to do the saving. It's not our job to do the work that God does. It's just our job to tell a good story.
Right. And it protects us from creating characters that we're forced to. Let's just give this guy was saved because of this reason.
Right.
Which
is hard, man. You can't do that.
It is. You can't
do that.
It's so hard to just put it on one thing and say this guy, well, it's because his father died of cancer and he was very Christian and he died and that's why I don't believe there's a God.
Right. And that's even like biblical, like when the disciples ask, "Hey, why did this guy sin?
Born blind?
Why was he born blind? Was it his sin or the sins of the Father?" And Jesus doesn't even go there. He's
right.
like, let's not go there.
Right.
This is for the glory of God.
Right. And so, to be honest with you, it's actually the Kendrick brothers have mastered this.
You think?
I think so. I think they've mastered it, not in the sense that it is something that how do I put this?
Because
I think it's
their depictions of the faith are very, very much in step and in alignment with their Baptist denomination.
Yeah.
So when they show someone praying, it's a very Baptist thing.
So they've mastered the art of film, faith-based, to be able to drive the audiences to experience this character's transformation and at times not be like, that's not real.
For the tribe.
For the tribe. That's what I'm talking about.
Okay.
So, but they know that. They're giving it to the tribe.
Yeah.
Tribe.
Yeah.
And I'm saying that we don't go there. My intent. Well, I think we're in the tribe in the sense that we're well connected with a lot of the members that are in the faith base.
Because it's beyond just that. It's about friendships.
Yeah.
It's about family. It's about love. It's about like these are people that like I love.
Yeah.
Because I love their hearts.
Right.
I love their passion. I love what motivates them. I love the God in them. Or through them. The Holy Spirit that works through them.
Yeah.
So
and I think that they know our hearts as well.
Yeah.
And
it's so beyond filmmaking.
But at the end of the day, I think that if for us, when we're making this film, we want to make sure that it is as honest as we can, where it doesn't go glorifying the wickedness,
right,
but exposing it to make the characters real and gritty.
Yeah.
That the exposition is not just laid out for you. you have to do the work.
Yeah.
And you are caused to have that internal struggle within yourself to either go to God or go away from God.
Got it. Perfect. Parabolic films. Cool. Okay, now let's close there. Do we have time for a tip of the week? Let's see. No, we don't. We're over. Let's call it. We'll give a tip of the week on the next week.
Oh, I had a good one.
Do you have
too.
a good one?
Yeah, well,
right, go ahead. We'll do it.
Well,
let's do it quick.
Well, one of the festivals we bumped into Kevin McCreary. We had such a great conversation about this particular topic.
Yeah.
And we were there for hours, and he came and watched our movie, and he was, he gave us thumbs up, and he was like, really enjoyed it, and gave us even his own feedback, which is so important. And he and this is his thing. This is his passion. His passion is to reveal the errors, the successes of faith-based films. Really funny guy, really nice guy. I would go check him out. His YouTube channel is Say Goodnight Kevin.
Yep.
And he just talks about this stuff.
Yeah, he does.
And I think it's so important.
I think much more depth than we.
I think it's so important for faith-based filmmakers to listen to this stuff so that they can master the skill and learn the things not to do and to do.
Yeah, because he is critiquing faith-based work and content in order to help. I think he has a genuine desire for this genre to improve in the technical storytelling aspects, and the technical, but what we've just discussed, and we have found out that perhaps, maybe it's an audience of one, and the improvement is there to reach, the technicality that is necessary to reach that audience of one is there, right? Cool. So Say Goodnight Kevin on YouTube?
Yeah.
All right, Kevin McCreary.
Yeah.
He's a funny guy.
Yeah.
I like him. He's hilarious.
Cool.
All right, and my creator's tip of the week is it's actually an edit app. So I've been doing a lot of editing on my phone and editing on the fly, and there's a ton of great edit apps, and there's some very simple ones. What I haven't found is an edit app that lets me do like multi-leveled non-linear editing. So most edit apps, just like they only give you one timeline, and you can't build on top of that multiple 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 timelines and edit sound, edit video, edit effects and all that. But I found one that does, and it's called Luma Fusion. Luma Fusion. It's a powerful multi-track video editor, and created specifically for phone or tablet.
Cool.
And so it's optimized for phone or tablet, but it does allow you to do things like Final Cut Pro does just on your phone, and it's optimized specifically for the phone. And so it's called the desktop class editing software because it's for the phone but has the power and the capacity of a desktop editor. So if you're on the go and you need to edit a scene or a sequence on your phone with the same power that you have on like Premiere or FCP, you can do so on Luma Fusion, but it's going to cost you $19.99.
Yeah. Well.
$19.99. But it's a good one. Check it out, Luma Fusion. You could probably find it on your app store, and it's for those of you that are editing on the fly, especially us like right now working on a doc. If we need to, for example, pull up the 4K iPhone 11 to capture some footage, and you want to edit that real quickly and throw it into a documentary, and downscale it to 2K, you're gonna get great footage, and you can already have it pre-edited right on your phone, ready to go.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Love
it.
All right, guys. Well, thank you so very much for joining us on The Harvest, episode 24. It's been a pleasure and an honor to talk to you guys about something that we're really passionate about. And perhaps the conversation will continue at some point down the road where we continue to explore this genre. And as things develop in the industry, especially with Kingdom Studios, as they're about to launch a series of films and projects, we're going to keep you guys informed and give you some news and some topics about what's going on in the industry, so we can track this thing, because I feel like we're the first, or rather, we are amongst the first to really discern or rather to put it out there for audiences to discern kind of like where the industry is headed, and giving this a definite definition, especially talking to owners of the AMCs of the world, and like these theater and theater branches, and how they're gonna have to at some point start calling these films faith-based. Otherwise, they're going to lose their theaters.
Yeah.
But anyway, thank you guys for watching. If you have any short questions, you can reach me real quickly and real easily on Twitter at xgarcia.
At Jonathan Harvest.
Or if you have any longer questions, you can email us at info@mountharvest.com. Thank you to our producer who is in the house. She's working on some documentary stuff as we speak, so she hasn't been able to join us for the discussion, which is why we went too long. But Chelsea Cowie, you can check her info in the show notes, and we will see you all next week.
Yes, and don't forget to flick that subscribe button. Share, like, please.
Flick it.
Awesome.
I gotta always act it out.
Yeah, I know.
All right.
Let's do it.
Join us at thepatreon.com/The Harvest Podcast for some BTS footage of our cinema production life.